Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Between Two Worlds, a podcast about belief, unbelief, and everything in between. I'm your host, Scott Trout, here with my co-host,
Joey.
Heyo. We're very excited for today's episode. We have a good friend from improv on with us today. And before I get any further, let's do some introductions, starting with Irina.
Hi, I'm Irina. I'm a not believer in religions, who is into believing in whatever suits you best.
Booyah. Thank you. Joey?
I'm jumping in. Okay, so I'm Joey. I am a believer of something that is totally not going to be a Christian, even though Scott is 100% going to try.
Okay. And I'm Scott. I am a believer in Christianity, even though it's the 21st century, and who is trying to figure out how Christians got such a bad rap recently. There it is. Great. Thank you for clearing that up. Okay, so this podcast is about Between Two Worlds, as the name suggests. And the thought here is, from my experience, I have friends who are religious, friends who are not religious, friends who are spiritual, not spiritual. And I really love talking with both sides. But then what I've realized is that the potential two different sides don't often intermingle. They don't often chat about things with each other. And I'm kind of curious why that is. Especially with spirituality, it's like, there feels like there's a lot of barriers up to hearing people's stories and chatting about ideas. And I think it's because it's too united to who we are. It's like a very deep part of who we are. So the hope is to interview people's stories and then talk through some of the things they believe, some of the things they're still working out, looking into. And but for the two different communities to actually hear somebody on the other side and hear how they're actually, what they've gone through, and that there's a lot more in between than having two different worlds would suggest. So that's why it's between two different worlds. So Irina, let's start off with, tell us where you're from and how did you end up here in Amsterdam? And then we'll move into your story of faith or unfaith, all that good stuff.
All right. So I'm from Colombia. I was born in Colombia, but I come from a mixed family. So my mom is Colombian. My dad is half Austrian, raised in Austria until he was 12 years old. And then he moved to Venezuela and Colombia. That's where my parents met. And I've been moving around since I was 4 years old. So I've lived in Colombia, Venezuela, US, Canada, Austria, France, and now here in Amsterdam. So my experience with religion, my mom actually is a person who for a very long time, since she was like 15 years old, she was looking for a religion that would fit her, I guess. So she experimented a lot, and she dragged my sister and me with her. So she comes from a Catholic family, as most Latin Americans usually are Catholic. So my Colombian grandparents, they were Catholic. And at first she would join them in going to church and so on and so forth. But later on, as she became a young adult, she started searching her own path, like late teenage years, or adult. So I remember when I was like 3 years old, she was an evangelist. So we would go to the evangelist church. I still remember some of those songs. And I always thought like, oh God, I remember having these thoughts already at thinking like, what is this? These people are like way too out there. So there would be a lot of singing and dancing around. And of course, I had also gone to the Catholic church with my grandparents. So it just felt so different. Well, the Catholic Church seemed really quiet and, more peaceful. The other one felt like people were on drugs or something. So I remember I already felt like I didn't really like being there. But my mom would force me. When I was 4, we moved to Venezuela, and in Venezuela there is a lot of witchcraft going on. So uh, yeah, like not voodoo, but still there's a lot of magic stuff going on, witchcraft things. Don't really know what teria sort of thing. And so my mom started doing a lot of that. So she wouldn't necessarily do it herself. You would go to someone who would knew how to do it. And it was quite surprising because the whole country thrives with that. They even have like 3, not gods, but deities, is that the word? So 3 people that they worship. So one is this, it's a woman who is what we call criollos. It's someone who was born from Spanish parents during colonial times, but was born in Venezuela. Then there is a native Indian guy, and then there is a black guy as well. So you would have kind of like the 3 races that were part of the country during colonial times. And there is even a whole mountain in Venezuela where people during Easter, or what we call Holy Week, they would go to that mountain to do rituals and all sorts of things. I remember going there when I was 8 years old. My mother brought me, and so I am very open to paranormal, supernatural, Santeria, witchcraft sort of things, because I saw things with my own eyes growing up. So you can tell me it was my imagination, it was just a dream, whatever it was. I know very well the things that I saw. I know how I felt, and those experiences. Like, yep, I definitely believe in all of this. So, for example, I remember sometimes we would be having bad luck when my parents my mom had a job, my dad had his own business, and sometimes the business was not making a lot of money, so we would go to like the woman that my mom used to go to, and she would give us some ritual to do, and it was crazy the kind of things that would happen. So like, for example, take a pumpkin and put it in a place of the house where nobody really goes to. So we put it in a bathroom that we didn't use. And she said it should last 7 days there and it will start rotting. But if there's somebody's doing witchcraft to you, it's gonna rot before that. And within 3 days, this pumpkin was like, we had it for months. It was with white worms coming out. It was absolutely rotten. It smelled putrid. It was just shocking to see that. And we bought it ourselves at the supermarket. And I don't think she didn't give it to us. So there were a lot of things going on like that. I also have like very, very scary stories that later, many years later, I double checked with my sister, and turns out we would see the same things, but we were too afraid to talk about it. So afterwards we confirmed, and I remember that night sleeping together in the same bed with my sister. We were teenagers and we're like, oh my God, you saw that too. Oh, it's so scary. So yeah, that definitely marked a period in my life. And so we lived in Venezuela for 5 years, and during those 5 years, my mom always was doing that. But at the same time, she didn't see it as a religion for herself or as a practice for herself. It's just that because in the country they do it so much that it was kind of like protection. You had to keep an open mind and keep yourself protected, because most likely somebody that was jealous or envious of you would be doing something. So you constantly had to be, checking and wearing like gold protections and like gold bracelets and things like that to protect yourself. So Yeah, it was quite a crazy time, especially when you're a kid and you get scared so easily. um, but then she went into Hinduism, Buddhism for a while, and then Hinduism as well. Buddhism didn't last very long, but we did learn about the religion. And then she went more into Hinduism. So she would take us to meditate with her, and she found like some person who would follow a guy named Sai Baba. So he was very famous for a while. And well, if you look for gurus, there are tons of gurus. You can even find documentaries on Netflix, like the guy from Bikram or Wild Wild Country, things like that. But it was never really, I mean, we were not that involved, so we were not really part of a cult. We would just go to this lady who would help us meditate, and that was pretty much it. But my mom always felt definitely more pulled towards Hinduism than any other of the things she tried out. So later on, we moved back to Colombia for a while, and she was still meditating. And then she started, she continued her journey, but then she kind of stopped forcing it on us. So once we became teenagers, pretty much, like she would still mention things, like, try meditating, or do yoga, do this and that, or a lot of emphasis as well around reincarnation, or like good karma, doing things so things don't get back at you, and that sort of thing, for growth, for spiritual growth, and for you to have a better life once you reincarnate and so on, but without really forcing it on us. And the thing that I liked the most was that at some point, we had experimented so much around it that, I'm very open-minded to, I believe in fairies, I believe in magic, in white and black magic. I believe in, part of me still believes in reincarnation, I definitely believe a lot on like the Buddhism principles, like in general, like don't hurt other creatures and just live in peace. And I spent 1 month in China, and it was so peaceful to go to the temples. It was really, really beautiful, and I definitely felt kind of peace that I have never felt in a Catholic church or in a Christian church and so on. So I'm quite open-minded. I consider myself more agnostic. I definitely believe in a higher power. I, like for example, when I want something or need something, like I was looking for a new job, so I tell my mom to don't say pray, we say ask for it, and she asks to her guru. So after many, many years, she finally found a guru. He's not alive anymore, but he wrote a massive book, and that for her is like her Bible. She has read it many, many times over the past 25 years probably, and she follows his teachings through the book, which is just like to really live in the present, to try to observe instead of just react immediately, and be more accepting of the things that you cannot change, etc., etc. So whenever we need something, let's say, she asks to her guru for it, and if somebody, like if they ask also that they need help with something, I will also kind of pray in my own way, and I still refer to God as God. Just, I grew up used to hearing that word, so that's the one that I pray to. My mom prays to Nisargadatta, that is the name of the guru, and I can still say God because I don't really have like a name, like a face, or I don't think, well, he looks like this or he's this person or whatever, right? So yeah, that's me and religion or beliefs.
That's actually really interesting because I didn't know any of this about you. So it's really cool to hear all the stories. The first thing that popped in my mind, are there specific things that you still practice for yourself, or did you all drop it when you went to Amsterdam?
No, I mean, well, I've already been on my own for many years, so not just to Amsterdam. I haven't lived with my parents in a long time, so and she doesn't push it onto me. I meditate more in the like fashionable way that people meditate nowadays, like it has become very popular, so I use Headspace and that sort of thing to do my 10 minutes a day, and that's pretty much it. But funny enough, my mom calls me my little guru, and the reason for that is because often when she is going through a really tough time, or she's having a fight with my sister or my dad or whatever, she comes to me to get that external view on things. And she tells me that basically it's assertiveness. I have just learned to be assertive. But, a lot of what she reads from her own guru, it should be that, it can easily be taken for assertiveness. It's just like, try not to change other people because you can't. You only have control over yourself. Or stop ruminating. So I think it's not so much linked to religion itself. So no, I don't really think I practice a lot of things. Although, yeah, there's something, for example, when I moved to this apartment, so the apartment I've been living since 1st of August last year, which is an apartment I bought, and suddenly I started getting really bad luck. So I moved here. I do have a lot of, like superstitions and little rituals and things like that I do like from that bit more pagan, let's say, side. So yeah, I was having a lot of bad luck. So then I texted my mom and my sister. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's happening. I don't know if the apartment has bad mojo. What is going on? So I immediately went to one of these places where they sell crystals and, incense and all of that. And I bought sage, and I got some crystals, and I cleaned the whole house with sage. And then it was summer, of course, it was in August. And I went out, left the sage burning, and when I came, everything was smoked. And my clean laundry was smoked. And then 4 months later, I was wearing some pants, and my colleague sitting next to me was just like, something smells burning. I'm like, oh crap. Just spill my pants. So yeah, I do enjoy those little more mystic little rituals, although I don't practice them as much. And if I get a chance every now and then to like get a tarot reading or something like that, I do enjoy it. I'm not gonna be like, well, the tarot says this, astrology says that, so I'm gonna follow it exactly as it is. But sometimes it's just like, just kind of clarity, or makes you decide what you really wanted, So I don't take it very strictly.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well, just how you've had such an interesting experience with different aspects of all these different religions. And so do you feel like as you navigate the world, it's more just what you find interesting? So things like, yeah, tarot cards, like, oh, I'll look into this will be interesting. Or is it more, habit? Like, I saw my mom do these things and it worked, and therefore I do them. I'm still kind of just curious, like, you have all these things, and then how does it inform how you operate in the world? And it still seems like kind of a mixture of all of them.
Yeah, so part of it it's habit, because I grew up with it, so it's like little traditions, like people still have cereal and milk for breakfast, even though they're adults, and they could make themselves a nice, omelette or something more elaborated and healthier. But because they grew up having it as kids, it's familiar and it's comfortable. So for me, I would say part of it is it's familiar and comfort zone, let's say. Part is I find it fun as well, and that's why I said I don't really follow it like it's it's super strict and whatever it says is black or white and I have to follow it. It's just sometimes out of curiosity, out of fun. But if I had, like, if I have to make a big decision or something, and still gonna have a tendency to go more towards that, like, I'm not a person who deals very well with uncertainty, and sometimes that gives me a little bit more of clarity, whether it is because I do believe that this is accurate and it's really the way I have to go, the path I have to go, or because when they tell you what it is, you realize, okay, I actually want to do the opposite. So it just helps you decide what is it that you really want.
And do you feel like any of the paranormal, the things you encountered in Venezuela, has any of that carried over into your experience in Europe? Or do you feel like that was more geographically, like a lot more people believed in it, were doing witchcraft, and therefore it was heavier there? Or has certain things carried on to Europe?
No, it's definitely something that I have left behind in Venezuela. And, in Colombia, there's a bit of that as well, because it's basically a mix between what the natives used to believe, with the mix of Catholicism when we were conquered, right? We were colonized. So I think that that's why those two things are so tied together, So here in Europe, you definitely don't see that. I mean, the maximum you see is things like tarot readings and so on. And well, I do have to say, in France, I would see it more. You often would get little papers in your mailboxes saying like some African, door a good guy like Mr. I don't know, Magoo or whatever. It can solve any, love problem, money problem, anything you want. He can solve it with some rituals and some magic. But that's again geographically, because it's something that also happens a lot in Africa. You get that in the Caribbean and in Africa. Most of those countries practice that sort of, witchcraft or Santeria or voodoo.
It's actually funny because we also have a lot of like paranormal exhibits and whatever here in the Netherlands. Even close to Amsterdam and even close to the city that I live in, there's once in so many months you get a flyer in your mail and it's like, hey, we have this paranormal day and you can do like aura readings and tarot readings and whatever at them. So I think it's becoming bigger here as well.
Yeah, but still people see it a bit more from more of a fun, curious, hippie sort of thing, rather than so hardcore as it is in Venezuela, because there is really a lifestyle. Everybody has been, as soon as if you get a newborn baby, they immediately give you, the little gold necklace with all the little things for protection and everything. So it's definitely more intense. But I think that one of the things that have stuck with me the most is probably my love for horror movies. And my favorite type are usually related to paranormal stuff. Sometimes I do get very, very scared because they are related to things I experienced in my childhood, and then they freak me out, but I still like it. But I think I try to stay away from that as well, because I do believe in it and it does scares me. It also, it's like with the ocean, you shouldn't fear it, but you should respect it. Kind of the way I feel towards that. And I prefer not to involve myself in it because it's like playing with fire.
Yeah, I totally get that, Bun. Like, I don't really get the Ouija board and I'm never gonna play with it because there's so many stories that people are like, hey, by the way, this horror movie is based on things that could have happened if you play with this as well. And when I was younger, I told Scott this in another episode, is that I also was really deep into paranormal stuff. And we had crazy stories, even here in this city. Like, we have a forest not far away. And at night, people could swear they see like flying cigarettes and just dark shadows in the forest. And one day, me and my sort of like adopted sister went towards that forest at night, and all of a sudden, we just both got frightened. I was 12. This was an 18, 19-year-old woman, just strong on our feet, and she just said, like, "Hey, dude, we're going back. Like, no matter what we're doing, we're not going to this forest." And we turned around, and it was like wind carrying us. Like, you gotta go. So
Yeah, funny enough, I remember my grandmother, my Colombian grandmother. She used to tell us these stories that immediately would give me goosebumps and would bring tears to my eyes. And she was from the countryside in Colombia, and so she had a lot of these like supposed urban legends, but she had lived them, like the things. So she was very she was a big believer of the I have no idea how you call that in English, but it's basically souls that are stuck in the purgatory, right? So in Colombia, people pray to those souls. And my grandmother, she had this belief that if you stayed up working very late, they would come for you. And so she had stories. She used to be a seamstress, and she used to, one time she stayed working till 1 a.m, and suddenly she started hearing carriages like horses on the street. And this was when she was still young, right? And she looked out the window, and it was like people bringing someone to a cemetery, like, when they are carrying the coffin and everything. But this was 1 a.m. Everyone was dressed in black. The horses were black. You couldn't really see faces or anything. It just scared the hell out of her. And so I remember whenever I was doing homework, just like I never wanted to stay past midnight. I was just like, always running because it scared me so much to be able to see something like she did. So yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, I'd rather not play with it, Let's not play with fire.
Wow. These are experiences that, yeah, I've not had much exposure with. So this is really fascinating. I just avoid, it's interesting because I avoid horror movies. Joe, I don't know if you enjoy them, but Irina, you like have had these experiences and yet you still really enjoy freaky paranormal. And I'm just like, nah, that's scary. I don't want to watch it. So interesting. Yeah, you've like been more exposed and yet more fascinated, maybe because
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so you've told us maybe up to, I think, early adulthood. So let's talk about your experience when you studied in America and your specific exposure to a more Protestant Christian religion there on your study abroad and what that did.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so when I was 15, I went to study to Connecticut. I was in a small town in Connecticut called New Milford. And I was in a homestay with a family where the guy was a recovering alcoholic. So the lady was Irish, she was American. They were probably in their late 40s. And they had already had 4 children of their own. But they were already adults. The youngest one, I remember, she was 24 years old, close by. So they were already quite, yeah, let's say, with their lives together and everything. And they had adopted 5 kids.
On top of their 4 that they had.
Yeah, so the other 4, they were already out of home, right? They were not helping them financially or anything. They were independent. And actually, I don't know if maybe because of the story with the alcoholism or something, but there were only 2 of them lived close by. So I only met 2 of them. And I don't know if they were in touch with the other 2 or not. But yeah, so at home there were 5 kids with me. they were there was one girl who was 13, one that was another girl that was 11, then a boy who was 11, another girl who was 7, and another girl who was 6. Poor boy. Right in a sandwich. And they were all kids that came from drug addict or alcoholic parents. Right?
Wow.
Take care of them. The oldest 2 girls were actually related. They came from the same mother, different father. So, but yeah, when I moved there, well, I had no idea that they were Christians. And by the way, I do have that question for you because I don't know what exactly is your religion, because Christian is a very big umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And every time people ask me what kind of Christians was my homestay family, I have no idea.
Yeah.
So when I arrived on a Monday, I think it was. So then they were showing me the house around, and they were, like telling me the stories. The kids were super excited, especially the 2 smallest ones. And then I remember they told me something. I don't remember what it was, but they said something, and my reaction was, "Oh my God!" And the first thing they all turned and they told me, "You can't say that." And I'm like, "What? You can't say the name of the Lord in vain." I'm like, I was 15 and I came from a very open family where my dad was teaching me to swear when I was already 3 years old. And,
Man.
like teaching me as a good Austrian, he was giving me sips of beer for me to see if I like beer or not at the age of 3 as well, and I could watch everything I wanted on TV. They were like, they didn't really have restrictions, they were very open to have conversations with us and so on. So already that restriction of not even saying the word God was like, and my English was not that good. I mean, that's the point of why I was there as well, right? To improve my English. So then I was like, so what do I say? And they were like, "Oh my gosh, you say God." And I'm like, okay. Then, oh my gosh, it is. So that was the first shock. Then the second one comes when we go to sit at the table to have dinner and we have to say grace. And they asked me, Alex, because, for those of you who remember still the story about my name, when I arrived, they asked me, "So how do you pronounce her name?" I say, Irina. They were like, "What? Irina? What? Irina? Do you have another name? Alexandra? Okay, we'll call you Alex. Is that okay?" Sure. So my parents are very open, but they always told me to be polite, and to just like say yes a lot. Not to be rude or not to be a pain in the ass. So they're like, "Alex, would you like to say grace?" And I'm like, I don't even know what this means, in English. I'm like, what is that? Yeah, would you like to say thank you to the Lord for our meal and so on? And I'm like, so the 11-year-old girl, Emily, she was like, "I'll do it." So she did it. And then I was like, okay, paying attention in case, because it's like, okay, next time is going to be me for sure. Oh, the stress. Shock number 2 was that. Shock number 3 came when it was time to go to bed. And they call us, it was summer. They call us at 9 p.m. And I'm like, "Kids, come here. It's time to read the Bible." Like, what? So then every night we had to read the Bible. And then they had like this book that was like Bible for kids or something. So it had a relatable story, like in day-to-day life, to the passage of the Bible we had just read. And then we could go to bed. So shock number 3. then they told me, okay, so we are, we're Christians and we like to go to church, for the service and so on. You don't have to come with us every day, but we'd like you tomorrow to join us so we can introduce you to our community and so on and so forth. So it was like, yeah, no problem, of course. Being polite, as my parents taught me. So the next day we went to the service. It was from 6 to 8 in the evening. And yeah, I went. It was okay. I mean, I had already been to a lot of things with my mom. So it's like, yeah, sure, I can do this, from time to time. And so sometimes they would always ask me, do you want to come with us or not? And so sometimes I would say yes, not to say no all the time, even though I really didn't want to go. And other times I would say no. And then there was one time where they went without me. And when they arrived, I was in the kitchen making a snack. And unfortunately, the kids ran into the living room way too fast because we were not allowed, one of the many shocks, I lost count already. We were not allowed to watch anything besides Disney Channel. And for a 15-year-old who grew up with no restrictions, I remember like even the horror movies my dad used to, like rent for himself, he would leave them an extra day so I could watch them during the daylight so I wouldn't get so scared. So they allowed me watching everything. So I was watching whatever I wanted, but then they rushed into the living room and I couldn't help it. So they arrived and it was like the cartoons when there's a line of people running, one of them stops and then the other one stopped crashing onto the front one. Happened when the boy, and it had to be precisely the boy, the 11-year-old boy, comes to the living room and there is a Victoria's Secret commercial, that moment, with the angels and their wings and their push-ups bra.
Oh gosh.
It was a disaster. So the mom screamed at me, what on earth are you watching? And after that, it was not anymore, Alex, do you want to come with us or not? It was, Alex, get in the car, we're going to church.
Man.
And the thing is that they were really intense. So they would not miss anything that was happening in that church. So there were services on Tuesday and Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Then on Wednesdays, the kids had Bible study from 7 to 9 p.m. where they would also make me go. Then on Fridays, there was the youth group from 7 to 9. And then Sunday, the day of the Lord, was the day when I was in hell. From 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then they would go to the short version again from 6 to 8.
Wow.
So my Sundays were church for 5 hours, then come home, eat something quickly, do my homework, and then rush back to church.
Wow.
It was a nightmare. And we were also not allowed to, like they had some games on the computer. We were not allowed to play anything that was with any shooting whatsoever. Anything that had something slightly violent was completely forbidden. Music, they could only listen to Christian rock. Still remember the song that the boy used to play over and over again. And
what song was it?
Sorry?
What song was it?
Something from AC/DC. I remember AC/DC. You know it?
Oh yeah.
So Jesus Freak.
Yes. That's amazing.
That's the song.
Yes.
I still remember it very well. So yeah, sometimes I remember one time we were going to another town for dinner. And so we were in the car and they were like, oh, let's play a game. So it was like, oh, let's play to guess the song. And then I kept trying to make them guess like songs that were popular in the radio at the moment. And then the mother was just like, Alex, they're never gonna guess those songs. They're not allowed to listen to normal radio. It's like, oh God.
Man.
Am I? Yeah.
And then you kind of had to escape or something, right?
Yeah, so I was supposed to stay there for 1 year. My sister came to visit me because she was living in Montreal, Canada. So my sister came to visit me for 1 week, and my parents kind of asked her to check on me to see how things were really, how bad they were, and then she came for a weekend, and she saw indeed it was. So the girl, the 11-year-old girl, she was, yeah, she had mental problems. So it's just like she would suffer from ADHD, and she would just have these massive episodes every 2-3 days. So she threw a tantrum while my sister was there, and she even took one of these Fuji bowls, like these bowls that are knitted and inside they have marbles. You remember those? So she threw one of those from across the room and hit me on my shoulder with it, and hurt like hell. And my sister immediately, like in 2 jumps, she picked her up from her pajamas and lifted up, and she's like, "You touch my sister again, I'm gonna kill you." So she went running to the parents, and of course they thought we were possessed or something. So then it was Sunday, and they made my sister come to church with us as well, because our souls needed to be saved, clearly. So after that, my sister, talked to my parents. She's like, "Yeah, we cannot keep her there." So I was supposed to stay 1 year. I stayed 6 months, and then I moved to Canada with my sister instead. Yeah.
But you lasted 6 months, which that's pretty impressive. Wow. A lot to unpack there. That's quite interesting. And so you have no recollection of what denomination they were, specific things that they believed in?
No, I remember like, it's like there were no images, in the church. There were no images. It was a pastor who was married. There was a lot of singing around, and like.
Did they have musical instruments with their singing? Okay. Yeah. Because there's some denominations that just do.
Sorry?
Some denominations just do a cappella, so that would help narrow it in.
No, they had their little like rock band and everything.
Okay.
From like the teenagers or young adults that they had in the group, and yeah, some people seemed like they were possessed. Like I remember there was a couple. I remember the lady kept walking on her chair the whole sermon. So she would also go to the 5 hours one. And during those 5 hours, she wouldn't stop rocking on her chair and saying, "Hallelujah, hallelujah, Jesus, hallelujah." And her husband would keep saying the same thing, but standing up with his arms up, like rocking from one side to the other. And I was like, oh my God, it's like 5 hours of this. It's like, God, this is something wrong with them. They're on drugs or something. How can they stand like that for 5 hours?
Wow. Yeah, it sounds Pentecostal. It sounds like, were they talking about the Holy Spirit a lot, and big on worship?
I don't know. No,
anyway.
But anyways, it was one of those.
Dang.
Yeah. And that was my story.
Man.
At least.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of our first episode. We're gonna jump back on here in a little bit and just go in a round of discussing things that were brought up, questions, even things, Irina, for us, questions you might have for me, especially just you've mentioned, and Joey's done this before too. They're like, I think said something like, "What kind of Christian are you? What type of Christian?" So we can go into that. So before we wrap up this first episode, let's all do a round of something that we are curious to find out more about in our second episode, things we'd like to discuss more.
Oh, I am definitely down to ask you, Scott, what you think about all the paranormal stuff.
Oh,
Like how do you think about that? And specifically, is that is there a belief or is there a non-belief on that, or is it in your head connected to God or anything else? So that's what I'm gonna ask in part 2.
cool. That sounds good.
On my side, I would like to ask you, Scott, what if you have had friends or family members that are quite fanatic, like the family I described, and what are your views on that?
Cool. And then I'd be curious. Well, yeah, so some of the things that I've written down kind of prior to was, what is your perception of Christianity based on the Christians you've interacted with? Although I could kind of connect some of the dots. It's not a great picture. Yeah, because I'm kind of curious, like, in your mind, what would, and Joe, yours as well, what would be the acceptable types of Christians and then the not acceptable types? So maybe we've gotten a good example of a little bit over the top. And so then what would be, like, what are worthwhile things within Christianity? Or do you kind of just blanket across the board, say, this is dangerous, or it's oppressive, or it's just like ridiculous? So I'd be curious, because you even mentioned like you still call God God. And so, yeah, things like that. Like what do you still hold on to from Christianity or that kind of thing? And I'm also kind of curious about the Bible, both for both of you guys. It seems like there's how Christians act, and then there's like what the Bible tells us to do or how to act. And sometimes those can be very different representations. And so then it's hard to say, like, is this actually Christianity, or is this like their brand of it that kind of deviated in some sort of way? So yeah, I'm kind of curious to hear like what your thoughts on the Bible and all that good stuff.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Well, thank you for listening to part 1 with Irina, our friend from improv, soon to be amazing participant of the show this Friday. If we get a chance to release this in the next 2 days, come and see us July 3rd at the Cray Cafe. It's going to be awesome.
Even though this is, again, probably going to be released in August.
You've been listening to Between Two Worlds, a podcast about belief, unbelief, and everything in between. Take a look at the next episode for a little back and forth on some ideas. See ya.